The Detroit Lions, a franchise that isn't known for its success, hasn't seen a divisional title since 1993. However, things in the division are changing tremendously, and after a late season spark, Detroit is looking to potentially end that streak this season. Their offense has seen some upgrades and it has caught the attention of many fantasy players looking for a boost. Does Detroit have the type of firepower that is needed for each and every fantasy team? Let's see for ourselves. How is everyone doing today? My name is Aaron and this is the Game Day Hour. Welcome back to the Fantasy Football Team Review. In this series, we take a look at each and every 32 NFL franchises and see what they offer for fantasy football. Here, we analyze the team's quarterback, running back, wide receiver 1 and 2, kicker, and tight end, backwards order, whatever. Our goal is to analyze last season and see if these players are worth drafting, and if so, when and where. Today, we analyze the Detroit Lions.
Jared Goff, Detroit Lions quarterback.
After coming over from the Rams with the trade with Matthew Stafford, Jared Goff has low-key revitalized his career. Now, his first season in Detroit wasn't so great, but this season, he put up some QB1 numbers. Let's take a look. So he played 17 games, and he had 382 completions, which was 8th in the NFL, to 587 total attempts, which was 6th. So you already know how I feel about that. I want more completions than attempts in rankings, which was 65.1%, which is 19th among all quarterbacks. He had 4,438 passing yards, which was 6th. 29 touchdowns. That's tied for the top 5. And he only had 7 interceptions, which has been one of the lowest so far on our list, which is 87th among all ranking quarterbacks. And I'm not going to get into the ranking of the interceptions. Just know the higher number, the worse it is, obviously. 334 total fantasy points. And even though you don't see on this video, I'm not going to put in PPR every single time. But just know we are ranking this based off PPR rankings. This was 8th among all quarterbacks. So in hindsight, last season, most of the time, this guy's probably your number one. Putting up numbers like this, I wonder if there was someone out there who had him as the number 2 and swapped him over as the number 1 because a quarterback got injured or wasn't playing as well. I want to know how many people actually had that. Which ultimately then leads to my projections. Now, I'm going to do this a little bit differently. So, first and foremost, is he somebody I would draft? Yes. I am going to start putting in a rankings, but right now I haven't done that yet for each quarterback. But just know that he is in the top 20, and I would actually roughly put him closer to Trevor Lawrence in the top of the 10s. But he's not in the top 10 just yet. To me, he's a quarterback 2, because I feel like either this was a fluke season, or if this season he does better or just the same, and Detroit gets where they want to go, then I might jump him into the top 10 of next season. But right now I have him as a high QB2 going in round 6 through 12, depending on what you value more to draft. Maybe he's a late round draft pick, who knows. But I would actually highly recommend him because his core got better. Obviously, Jamison Williams, he is suspended for a little bit. So your 2 wide receivers are Amon-Ra and Marvin Jones. And those 2 can definitely get you a lot of moves. And of course, they upgraded the running back position tremendously. So let's see. I think Jared Goff is probably going to blow up this year. He has all the weapons in order to do so. And because of what he did last year, I feel like this team is trending upwards and he's trending with it. Potentially, he's gotten better than Matthew Stafford, who had a very poor season last year. I don't know how I feel about Matthew Stafford. We'll get to the Rams video later.
Jahmyr Gibbs, Detroit Lions running back.
You know, it's very confusing when you draft a running back in the first round, especially if you went to go pick up a running back from another team in a trade. And Montgomery was the guy. He from Chicago, and now he's at Detroit after Swift went on to Philadelphia. But Detroit still drafted a running back as early as the 12th pick in the first round. But this guy isn't so bad. Of course, we're talking about Jahmyr Gibbs. And at Alabama last year, he's been all over the place. Georgia Tech for first 2 years, and then played 1 season in Alabama. Did very, very well. So let's take a look at his stats. So again, it's unbeknownst how many games he played. I imagine he's played all of them. And at Alabama last year, he had 151 total carries with 926 rushing yards and 7 touchdowns. That's some big numbers. But then, he continues to add on. 44 receptions, 444 receiving yards, 3 touchdowns. He had 10 touchdowns on the year. And of course, again, he was drafted in the first round as the 12th overall pick. Not the first running back to go off the board, but even though a lot projected him as the second, I felt like this might have been a reach pick. And because I'm sitting in that area where he's a reach pick, he is a guy, for the first time in any of my projections, he's somebody who I'm not saying yes, nor am I saying no, because he has the stats to prove it. But I'm on the fence. If I were to say yes, he might actually be better than a running back 4, and I might want to lump him in on a 40 or 50 running back list, potentially in the 30s or the 40s. Because I don't want to put him much higher than that just yet. But that's why I have running back 4, rounds 12 through 16. I was a little confused by this pick, but I know he's a very good player. The only problem I have is, look, I trust a running back who is the best running back undoubtedly on the team. When you're playing a 2-back backfield, it's a little concerning who you want to go with. The Cowboys managed to pull it off. The Browns managed to pull it off. But can Detroit? I don't know. Who's going to start? Is it going to be Montgomery or Gibbs? And I believe right now it's Gibbs on the starting lineup. But who knows who's going to get more reps? Potentially could be Montgomery. But if Gibbs does end up playing most of the snaps, and he does what he does at Alabama, then he is somebody who I would draft. Other than that, I don't know.
Amon-Ra St. Brown. Detroit Lions wide receiver 1.
I gotta say, I am pretty excited for this one. This is undoubtedly the best player on the Detroit Lions. It's weird because this guy has always ran under my radar for fantasy, but I'm not doing it again. If this guy's on the board, he's somebody I want to pick up, so you already know how I feel about him, but it's because of stats like these. And remember, new quarterback in the system, it's not Matthew Stafford, so he's been with Jared Goff for a little bit, but this is Amon-Ra St. Brown's stats. He's played 16 games last year, 106 receptions, 7th among all receivers, 1,161 receiving yards, that's 11th, 6 touchdowns, he could use a little more touchdowns, that's tied for 24th, but 255 total fantasy points, that's 7th among all receivers. Now, at first I had this guy at a wide receiver too, on most people's fantasy list. I would say that he's the second best wide receiver on their team. But looking at this roster and looking at what Goff did last season, this guy has the potential to be a number 1, which is where I have him in projections. To me, he's a draftable player by all means. He's going to get you what you need. Is he a number 1? Depends on the team. But he does have the ability to be a number 1. And I see him being drafted in rounds 3 through 6. I don't think he's a first round draft pick. I don't even think he's a second round. But as a third, I think he's much liable to go there. And he is somebody who I would highly recommend. This guy, I don't know where I would put him just yet on my list, but I imagine he's surfacing between the 8th spot and the 12th spot, somewhere in there. But I have to wait and see. If you want a reliable wide receiver, even if it is a wide receiver 2, do not be afraid to take Amon-Ra St. Brown. This guy can play. This guy is going to get you the yards. I don't know about the touchdowns, but for sure the yards. He's going to get you everything you need. So I recommend going after this guy. If he's on the board and if he's best available, you need a wide receiver, St. Brown is your guy.
Marvin Jones Jr. Detroit Lions wide receiver 2.
So at the moment on the depth chart, Jamison Williams, the second wide receiver on this list, is suspended for 6 games. So the next guy up is Marvin Jones, a former Detroit Lion and a former Jacksonville Jaguar. Now, I've had him on fantasy before. And back in the days when he was with the Lions, he is a very reliable player to have on your team. He would average around 700 yards and somewhere with 6 touchdowns. But with Jacksonville last year, he did not have those type of stats. So he played 16 games. He had 46 receptions, which was tied for 86th among all receivers. He had 529 receiving yards. That's 75th. He had 3 touchdowns. That's tied for 65th. And he only had 110 total fantasy points. That's tied for 55th. Now, that's kind of where I have him on my list, just out of the top 50. And because he's out of the top 50, to me, he's not a draftable player. But if you do, again, I would say he is a wide receiver 4. I wouldn't even call him a flex position unless he starts to go off. But most of the time, you're going to see this guy in free agency. Now, if he starts to go off, he's a good free agency pickup to have, definitely. And he does have the ability to have those type of games. So in case Amon-Ra is not getting it done, in these first 6 games, you might see high production. Maybe it is a good idea to get Marvin. But afterwards, Jameson Williams is probably going to be that number 2. But if you draft Marvin, go for it. I mean, he's shown some fantasy production in the past. But I think in most leagues, this guy will not be drafted. So be careful when it comes to Marvin Jones. I don't even know if he will be a top wide receiver by the time you get to the later rounds. Who knows?
Brock Wright, Detroit Lions tight end.
At the tight end position, it's been TJ Hawkinson for a while, but now it's Brock Wright. And some say it might be Sam Laporta, but right now Wright is the number 1 on the depth chart. So we're going to take a look at his stats first. So again, although he played 17 games, half of those were as a backup to Hawkinson, who then went on to Minnesota, who we'll be talking about in the next episode. Despite him playing 17 games, he's only had 18 receptions, so that's like 1 reception per game. That's 216 receiving yards on the season. But though he had 4 touchdowns in the games he was starting, which were about 8 or 9, he had 4 touchdowns. That's like a touchdown every other game, which is pretty good for a tight end, which ultimately led him off with 60 total fantasy points. That's 38th among all tight ends. Now, if this was a receiver in a running back list, then hey, all to it, but it's just a tight end list. So he doesn't crack my top 20, and because of that, he's not somebody who I'm going to end up drafting. And I don't even see a reason why anyone would draft him unless they actually thought this guy is going to be a big-time tight end. But no matter what, he's a tight end too. He's not going to be anything more than that unless he has a blow-up season in which he could end up becoming a tight end 1 in the future. You never know. But I wouldn't even really give this guy a lot of attention unless you really thought that, hey, this guy's about to go off. I don't see it happening this year. He could have better stats now that he's going to be the full-time starter, or revert back to being the second guy behind Sam Laporta. So because there's 2 tight ends in the mix there, I'd be a little weary about this guy.
Michael Badgley, Detroit Lions kicker.
Now, there's a little bit of confusion here. Riley Patterson, the kicker for Jacksonville, is now on the Detroit depth chart, and it's going to be a little interesting to see if that's going to cause a problem for Michael, who we're going to be taking a look at right now. Here's the deal. He's not he's not a bad player. Like, a lot of kickers we've been looking at are not draftable, in my opinion. This guy is on the verge, but I'm not completely sure. So let's see his stats. He played 1 game for Chicago and 12 for Detroit, and in those games, he's 24 for 28 in made and attempted. That's 85.7%. That's tied for 21st. He did not miss an extra point all year long. He was 33 for 33. That's tied for first. His long was 53, so if you're in a league where, depending on the length of the field goal, you get more points, which is a league that I'm in, that's not somebody that really interests me. And he had only 105 points, which was 24th in the entire league, which ultimately led to 109 total fantasy points. That's 25th. So in the ways of fantasy, he's in the top 25. And when I make this list, whenever I make it, the thing is they're going to be a list where it's top 25 for positions that have 2 players, and then top 50 for a position that has more than 2 players, like the wide receiver and the running back position, which has 4. And even though he's in the top 25, he is not somebody I would draft now that I see there's another kicker who could potentially take his spot. But if you think that he's going to be the full-time starter, again, he's a kicker too because he's just in that range of the top 25. Rounds 15 through 16, I don't see him being picked any sooner than that. So the last guy on our list, he's a no-go for me in the draft, but he could be a go for someone else, and we're not going to take that possibility out of there. He could just be the good, reliable backup that he needs to be. And that'll do it for today's episode. So thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked today's video, please leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe. Hit that bell notification if you want to see updates for when I make new videos and new episodes. And by the way, these past episodes have been great. The NBA video has over 120 views. My Green Bay Packers video has over 30 views, and I'm starting to get comments on them. Hey, if you want to comment, go right ahead. I would be happy to discuss things with you, as long as you keep it civil, as long as you keep it respectable. I will definitely interact with you guys in the comments. I hope you guys are still watching the NBA Finals. I hope you guys are still enjoying that. And also, I'm managing to finally post on Instagram. I was having trouble doing that at first. Now I'm able to start doing that. And if you guys want to follow, again, in the outro, you'll see all the links: Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can go follow and go watch from there. And then, is there anything else? Oh yeah, so you can see I have the face cam video on for the entire section, especially when we're talking about each player, the strips, the steel background. I'm going to try implementing that more often to try to get my face cam in there more and more, to get in the habit of doing this. So hope you guys are excited for that. Next episode will be for the Minnesota Vikings, and then we are going to move on to the AFC East and start with the New England Patriots. So I hope you guys have a great day, take care, and I will see you guys then. Peace.